Malcolm Hayes pulled his worn jacket tighter against the March wind slicing through Lincoln Avenue. The Newark morning was gray, the kind of gray that clung to the cracked sidewalks and rusted bus stop signs like an unwanted guest. At 27, Malcolm had grown used to these early hours, dragging himself out of bed at 5 to get Ethan, his 6-year-old son, ready for school. The routine was relentless: dress Ethan, pack his lunch, walk him to the elementary school 3 blocks away, then hustle to the bus stop for a takeaway coffee before his IT support shift started. Today, like every day, felt heavy with the weight of being a single father, a black man in a city that watched him too closely. The street hummed with early commuters' delivery trucks rattling, a woman in scrubs hurrying past, a man shouting into his phone. Malcolm kept his head down, his sneakers scuffing the pavement. He'd learned long ago that eye contact in this neighborhood could invite trouble, judgmental glances, or worse. 3 years after his wife's death in a car accident, he still carried the ache of her absence, but Ethan's small hand in his every morning kept him moving. At the bus stop, a small crowd waited, 2 teenagers scrolling on their phones, an older man with a thermos, and today someone new. A white woman in her mid-30s sat in a wheelchair, her navy blazer sharp against the dull backdrop. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and a leather satchel rested on her lap, papers spilling slightly as she struggled to tie a loose strap. Malcolm's eyes lingered. He recognized her, Laura Bennett, the CEO, whose face had graced business magazines, dubbed the Steel Queen of Finance. She looked out of place here, her polished presence clashing with the grit of Newark's outer edges. Malcolm hesitated. Approaching a white woman, especially one like Laura, wasn't simple. He'd seen how quick people were to misread a black man's intentions, to assume he was crossing a line. The thought stung. Years of being sized up for his skin instead of his character hadn't dulled the edge. But Laura's hands fumbled, her jaw tight with frustration, as the strap slipped again. Something in Malcolm stirred the part of him that still believed in doing right no matter the cost. He stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Need a hand with that." Laura's head snapped up, her blue eyes sharp with caution. For a moment, Malcolm braced for rejection, for the polite dismissal he'd heard too often. But her gaze softened just enough to notice, and she nodded. "Sorry, this curb always trips me up." Malcolm crouched beside her, careful not to crowd her space. He steadied the satchel, his calloused fingers working the strap into a neat knot. "They built this place for sprinters, not wheelchairs," he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "Bet they think it's a gym." Laura's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through her guarded expression. "They should charge admission," she replied, her voice crisp but warmer now. She adjusted her posture, the strain in her shoulders easing slightly. "I'm Laura Bennett. Thank you. Malcolm Hayes." He stood wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm around here most mornings. Holler if you need me." Laura nodded, her eyes lingering on him a beat longer than necessary. "I'll keep that in mind." The bus hissed to a stop, and Malcolm stepped back, letting Laura maneuver toward the ramp. She moved with a practiced grace, but he caught the faint tremor in her hands, the weight of something heavier than the satchel she carried. He turned toward the coffee shop, the encounter settling into his thoughts like a pebble in a still pond. It wasn't just her face from the magazines. There was something in her eyes, a mix of exhaustion and defiance he knew too well. Inside the shop, the barista slid his usual black coffee across the counter. Malcolm paid his mind, replaying the moment. He'd helped people before, held doors, carried groceries, but this felt different. Laura Bennett wasn't just anyone. She was power wealth, a world he'd never touch. Yet she'd looked at him. Really looked, without the usual wariness he'd come to expect. It unsettled him, the way her smile had cracked through her armor. Back on the street, the wind felt sharper, the day heavier. Malcolm sipped his coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. He thought of Ethan, probably doodling in his notebook at school, oblivious to the way the world judged his father. Malcolm had lost his teaching job 2 years ago, pushed out after parents complained about a black man teaching their kids coding. Now, troubleshooting servers at a logistics firm paid the bills, but it didn't fill the hole left by dreams deferred. He glanced back at the bus stop, now empty. Laura's presence lingered, a question mark in his routine. Why was she here in Newark? Of all places, CEOs didn't ride buses in neighborhoods like this. Maybe she was visiting, or maybe like him she was running from something. He shook his head, pushing the thought away. People like Laura Bennett didn't cross paths with people like him for long. Still, as he walked toward the train station, his steps felt lighter. The morning hadn't changed, same streets, same struggles, but something had shifted, subtle as a new note in a familiar song. Malcolm didn't know it yet, but that fleeting exchange at the bus stop had planted a seed, one that would grow into something neither he nor Laura could ignore. He tightened his grip on the coffee cup and kept moving, unaware that tomorrow he'd look for her at the bus stop again. The next morning, Malcolm Hayes woke to the familiar buzz of his alarm, the Newark dawn still cloaked in gray. He dressed Ethan in a hurry, the 6-year-old yawning as he clutched a stuffed dinosaur. After dropping him at school, Malcolm headed to Lincoln Avenue, his sneakers crunching on gravel. The bus stop loomed ahead, and though he wouldn't admit it, his eyes scanned for Laura Bennett. Yesterday's encounter lingered a brief moment that felt like a crack in his routine, letting in a sliver of light he wasn't sure he trusted. She was there, her wheelchair positioned near the curb, a black scarf draped over her navy coat. The wind tugged at her blonde bun, but her posture remained steady, almost regal. Malcolm slowed his breath, fogging in the chill. He hadn't planned to approach, but when Laura's gaze met his, a faint nod invited him closer. He stepped forward, coffee cup warm in his hand. "Morning," he said, voice cautious. "You surviving this cold?" Laura's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Barely. I forgot how brutal Jersey winters feel." He chuckled, easing into the moment. "Gotta keep moving. Keeps the blood warm." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're here every day, aren't you?" "Most days." "Coffee run, then work. Same old." He nodded toward the shop across the street. "Want one, my treat?" Laura hesitated, her fingers tightening on her satchel. Malcolm caught the flicker of unease in her eyes, maybe the same wariness he felt, the unspoken rules of race and status hovering between them. But she nodded. "Black, no sugar." "Thanks." He returned minutes later, handing her the cup. Their fingers brushed, and Malcolm felt a jolt, small but undeniable. Laura sipped her shoulders, relaxing. "You're good at this," she said, making mornings less miserable. "Practice," he replied, grinning. Ethan's a tough critic. Over the next week, the bus stop became their unspoken meeting place. Malcolm helped Laura navigate the uneven curb, pushed her wheelchair when the ramp was blocked, and traded small talk that grew less guarded each day. He learned she'd moved to Newark from Manhattan after a messy divorce, trading skyscrapers for a quieter life near her aging mother. Laura spoke of boardrooms where her voice carried weight, but left her hollow of nights spent alone despite the world knowing her name. "You ever feel like you're shouting but no one's listening?" she asked one morning, her coffee steaming in the cold. Malcolm leaned against the bus stop sign, his dark eyes distant. "All the time. Try being a black dad at a parent-teacher meeting. Every word's a test, like I gotta prove I'm not trouble." Laura's gaze softened. "That's exhausting." "Yeah." He shrugged, but his voice held an edge. "Ethan's worth it. Keeps me fighting." She nodded, a quiet respect settling between them. Malcolm found himself sharing more stories of Ethan's obsession with robot toys, the time he cried teaching his son to ride a bike. Laura listened, her laughter rare, but genuine, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She told him about her ex-husband, a finance mogul who'd left her for someone younger, and the headlines that painted her as cold, unlovable. "People think I'm steel," she said, her voice low. "Maybe I am. But it's heavy." Malcolm met her eyes. "Heavy don't mean unbreakable." Their talks deepened each morning, peeling back another layer. Malcolm bought Laura coffee, daily, a ritual that felt like more than kindness. One frigid day, as snow dusted the pavement, he noticed her shivering, her thin coat no match for the wind. Without thinking, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Newark don't care if you're black or white," he said, half joking. "Cold's equal opportunity." Laura froze, her fingers grazing the worn fabric. "You didn't have to," she murmured, but her eyes held his, searching as if seeing him anew. "Thank you, Malcolm." He nodded, shoving his hands in his pockets to hide the warmth creeping up his neck. The bus pulled up, and he helped her onto the ramp, their routine seamless now. But as she rolled away, Laura glanced back, her gaze lingering longer than usual. Malcolm felt it, a shift subtle but heavy, like a door left ajar. The neighborhood noticed. A shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. A passerby whispered to a friend. Malcolm felt the weight of their stares, the silent questions about a black IT guy and a white CEO. Laura, too, seemed aware, her posture stiffening when strangers lingered too long. She never said it, but Malcolm sensed her fear of being misjudged, of her kindness mistaken for pity, or worse. Yet neither pulled away. One morning as they waited, Laura asked about Ethan's school. "He's got a science fair coming up," Malcolm said, pride softening his voice. "Kid's building a robot arm. Says it's going to save the world." Laura smiled, real this time. "He sounds like you. Determined." Malcolm laughed, but her words settled deep. He looked at her, the steel queen who rode a bus in Newark, who listened to his stories without judgment. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a black man under scrutiny, but as Malcolm, father, fighter, human. As the bus hissed to a stop, Laura reached for his hand, a brief touch that sent a spark through him. "See you tomorrow," she asked, voice soft. "Count on it," he said, watching her go. Malcolm turned toward work, the cold biting his skin without his jacket. But inside something warmed, a fragile hope that these mornings were becoming something more. Malcolm Hayes woke to the same gray Newark dawn, the air sharp with the promise of snow. He moved through his routine, waking Ethan, packing a lunch, walking the boy to school, but his thoughts drifted to the bus stop, to Laura Bennett. Their mornings had become a quiet anchor, a ritual that steadied him against the grind of IT shifts and the weight of being a black, single father. Today, though, an unease gnawed at him, a premonition he couldn't shake. At Lincoln Avenue, the bus stop was emptier than usual. The teenagers were gone, the old man with the thermos absent. Malcolm scanned the curb, expecting Laura's wheelchair, her navy coat, her guarded smile. Nothing. The wind howled, rattling a loose sign, and his stomach twisted. She'd been there every day for weeks, her presence as certain as the coffee in his hand. He waited, sipping slowly, but the bus came and went, leaving only the echo of its engine. Malcolm told himself she was fine. Maybe a meeting, a change in plans. CEOs didn't owe him explanations. Still, as he trudged to the train, the absence clung like damp cold. His shift at the logistics firm dragged the hum of servers and flicker of screens blurring into worry. By noon, he was troubleshooting a network glitch when his phone buzzed a number he didn't know. He answered, heart-thudding. "Mr. Hayes." A woman's voice, urgent. "This is Maria Laura Bennett's housekeeper." She fell down the stairs at home. "She's asking for you. Can you come?" Malcolm's breath caught. "She okay. She's hurt, not critical. But your number was the last in her phone. Please, can you help? I'm on my way." Malcolm hung up, mind racing. He called his mother, arranging for her to pick up Ethan from school, then grabbed his jacket and ran. The streets blurred past vendors, potholes, faces he didn't see. Laura, the steel queen, falling alone in her own home, calling for him. It didn't fit. Yet it did. Their mornings had woven a thread neither had named. He reached Laura's penthouse in a high-rise overlooking the Passaic River, its glass facade gleaming against the cloudy sky. Maria, a middle-aged woman with worried eyes, let him in. The apartment was vast, all marble floors and sleek furniture, but it felt hollow, like a museum after hours. "She's in the living room," Maria said, leading him through a hall lined with abstract art. Laura sat on a low couch, her wheelchair beside her, a blanket draped over her legs. Her face was pale, a bruise blooming on her cheek. Her eyes, usually sharp, were glassy with pain and something softer relief when they met Malcolm's. "You came," she whispered, voice cracking. "Course I did," Malcolm said, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" "Stupid misstep," she said, wincing. "Tried to move too fast. Stairs got me." Maria hovered. "Ambulance is coming, but she refused to go until you were here." Malcolm frowned, his hand hovering near her shoulder. "Laura, you need a hospital, now." She shook her head, a tear slipping free. "I thought I could handle it, handle everything, but I'm scared." Malcolm. The words hit like a punch. Laura Bennett, who commanded boardrooms, who stared down critics, was trembling. Malcolm took her hand, her skin cold against his. "You're not alone," he said. "I'm here." The ambulance arrived, and Malcolm rode with her, holding her hand, as paramedics checked her vitals. At the hospital, he stayed signing forms as her emergency contact, a role he hadn't expected but didn't question. Hours later, in a sterile room, Laura lay propped on pillows, her leg in a brace, her eyes clearer but heavy. "It's just a sprain," she said. "I'll be fine." "You're not fine," Malcolm said, pulling a chair close. "You're human. That's okay." She looked away, tears welling again. "I'm supposed to be stronger than this." Malcolm leaned forward, voice steady. "You are strong. But even steel bends sometimes." Laura's gaze met his searching. "Why do you keep showing up?" He paused, the question cutting deeper than he'd expected. "Because you see me," he said. "Not the black guy, not the IT grunt. Me." She swallowed, her hand tightening on his. "You see me too. Not the CEO, not the headlines. Just Laura." The air shifted heavy with truth. Malcolm leaned back, needing to lighten the moment. "Want to hear about Ethan's bike crash? Kid fell, cried louder than me, but we both survived." Laura laughed, a soft sound that warmed the room. "Tell me." He did, spinning the story until her shoulders relaxed. Then, unprompted, he shared more. "I used to teach coding," he said. "Loved it. But parents didn't want a black guy near their kids. Said I wasn't safe. So I quit. Took this job to keep Ethan fed." Laura's eyes darkened. "That's not fair. Life ain't fair," he said, shrugging. "But I keep going." She studied him, her voice barely above a whisper. "They say I'm too cold to love. My ex, he said no one could handle me. I believed him. Until you." Malcolm's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck. Instead, he squeezed her hand, letting silence speak. The nurse entered, breaking the moment, and Malcolm stepped back as they adjusted Laura's brace. She'd be discharged soon, but something had changed. They weren't just bus stop acquaintances anymore. As evening fell, Malcolm helped Laura into a cab, promising to check on her tomorrow. He left the hospital, the Newark skyline glowing faintly. The day had shaken him, but it had also clarified something. Laura wasn't just a habit. She was a reason to keep showing up. 4 days after Laura's fall, Malcolm Hayes sat in his cramped Newark apartment, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows on the walls. Ethan slept in the next room, his dinosaur toy tucked under his arm. The hospital visit had left Malcolm unsettled. Laura's tear-streaked face burned into his mind. Their mornings at the bus stop felt distant now, replaced by a deeper connection he wasn't sure how to name. His phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a text from Laura. "Can you come over? I'm feverish. Scared to be alone." Malcolm's heart thudded. He glanced at Ethan's door, then called his neighbor, Mrs. Carter, who agreed to watch the boy. Grabbing his coat and a bag of cold medicine from the corner store, he caught a late bus across town. The Newark night was biting streetlights flickering over empty sidewalks. Laura's penthouse loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the city's faint pulse. He rode the elevator up, his reflection in the polished walls, showing a man caught between duty and something more. Maria, the housekeeper, let him in, her face tight with worry. "She's in her bedroom," she said. "Won't let me call a doctor." Malcolm nodded, stepping into the vast apartment. The marble floors gleamed, but the air felt heavy, untouched by warmth. He found Laura curled on her bed, her wheelchair parked nearby, a damp cloth across her forehead. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing shallow. She opened her eyes, relief softening her features when she saw him. "You came?" she whispered, voice hoarse. "Couldn't leave you like this," Malcolm said, setting the medicine on the nightstand. He filled a glass with water, opened a packet of flu pills, and handed them to her. "Take these. Then we talk." Laura swallowed the pills, wincing as she leaned back. Malcolm pulled a chair close, but she patted the bed. "Sit here," she said, her voice fragile but insistent. He hesitated, then sat the mattress, dipping under his weight. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. "You didn't have to do this," Laura said, her eyes searching his. "I'm a mess." "You're sick." Malcolm corrected, his tone gentle. "Happens to everyone." She shook her head, a tear slipping free. "Not just tonight." "I thought I was fine, Malcolm. After the divorce, the headlines, I built this wall. But you show up every morning and I want to let it down. It scares me. Malcolm's chest tightened. He knew fear. Fear of being seen as less of failing Ethan, of stepping into a world that judged him before he spoke. But Laura's fear was different, raw, like a wound she'd hidden too long. He took her hand, her skin warm from fever. "You're not alone in being scared," he said. "I'm terrified half the time." Her lips trembled. "Of what?" "Of this," he admitted, voice low. "Of you. I'm just a guy from Newark, Laura. People like me don't end up with people like you. I keep thinking you'll see me as the help, someone to fix things and leave." Laura's eyes widened, glistening. "You're not the help," she said fiercely. "You're the only one who sees me. Not the CEO, not the Steel Queen. Just me." The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Malcolm felt the air shift, the distance they'd kept crumbling. He wanted to pull back to protect himself, but her hand tightened on his, anchoring him. "I'm scared too," she whispered. "My ex said I was too cold to love. I believed him. Then you came, and every morning I wake up wanting to see you. I'm afraid if I let you in, you'll leave like he did." Malcolm's throat burned. He leaned closer, his voice steady. "I'm not him. I don't know what this is, Laura, but you're my reason to get up now. Not Ethan, not work you." A sob broke from her, and before he could think, Laura leaned forward, her arms wrapping around him. Malcolm froze, then held her, her fever-warm body trembling against his. The world, Newark, the penthouse, the whispers of race and class melted away. For the first time, they weren't a black IT guy and a white CEO. They were just Malcolm and Laura, two people daring to need each other. He stayed through the night, brewing tea, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, telling stories of Ethan's robot-building antics, until her laughter filled the room. Near dawn, Laura's fever broke, and she fell asleep, her hand still in his. Malcolm watched her, the first light of morning creeping through the blinds. He should leave, get back to Ethan, but he couldn't move. This moment, fragile and real, was worth every risk. As the city woke below, Malcolm slipped out, leaving a note. "Rest up. I'll be back." He stepped into the cold, the weight of their confessions settling like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but knew he'd try. The Newark mornings softened as spring crept in the gray of March, giving way to April's hesitant green. Malcolm Hayes and Laura Bennett were no longer just faces at the bus stop. Their lives had intertwined, a quiet rhythm of shared coffees and late-night talks that defied the city's watchful eyes. Malcolm still walked Ethan to school, but now Laura often joined them, her wheelchair rolling beside them as Ethan chattered about robots. The neighborhood whispered about the black single dad and the white CEO, but Malcolm and Laura let the gossip fade, their bond stronger than strangers' stares. Laura became a fixture in Malcolm's world. One evening she arrived at his small apartment, her polished blazer out of place among the cluttered counters. Ethan grinned, handing her a spatula as they made pancakes, flour dusting her sleeves. Laughter filled the kitchen, a warmth Malcolm hadn't known since his wife's death. Laura read Ethan bedtime stories, her voice steady as he drifted off, and Malcolm watched, his heart full. She wasn't the Steel Queen here, just Laura, who fit into their lives like she'd always belonged. Weekends brought new rituals. Laura planned a picnic in Branch Brook Park, pushing her limits to keep up with Ethan's energy. Malcolm taught her to cook his mother's cornbread, their hands brushing over mixing bowls. Ethan adored her, calling her Miss Laura with a shy smile, and she returned his affection, buying him a robot-building kit that sparked hours of play. The three of them built a fragile family, not with grand gestures, but with moments stitched together by choice. The city still judged. A barista raised an eyebrow when Malcolm and Laura ordered together. A passerby muttered about unlikely pairs. Malcolm felt the sting, the old fear of being seen as less. Laura, too, sensed the weight of her status, the assumption that her love was fleeting. But they held fast, their mornings at the bus stop, a quiet rebellion against doubt. A year to the day they met, Malcolm waited at Lincoln Avenue, a handmade album tucked under his arm. Laura arrived, her eyes bright, despite the early hour. He handed her the album ticket stubs, coffee receipts, a blurry selfie with Ethan pages, filled with his uneven handwriting. The final note read, "If you want, I'll be here every morning, every night, every day." Laura's breath caught tears glistening. She traced the words, her voice soft. I don't need promises, Malcolm. Just knowing we'll meet here tomorrow, that's enough. They stood close, the city waking around them. No rings, no headlines, just a shared certainty. Malcolm wasn't just the IT guy anymore, and Laura wasn't the untouchable CEO. They were two people who'd chosen each other past the scars of race, class, and loss. Ethan ran up, tugging Malcolm's hand, and Laura laughed, ruffling his hair. The bus hissed to a stop, but they didn't board. Instead, they walked together, a family forged in the quiet spaces where love grew strongest.